Hello, hello. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Would you please take your seats? Thank you so much. As our panelists are making their way to the dais, we have an action-packed 2 hours, and we really want to get this started because we want to make sure we utilize every single moment of this time that we have. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Glenda Newell Harris, and I am the 16th National President of the Links Incorporated. Welcome to our third public forum. I want to especially thank the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and in particular, our congressional sponsor, the Honorable Al Green of Texas, for allowing us to be part of the 46th Annual Legislative Conference. Mike, sound. Today, we look at an issue that has impacted our safety and our psyche on a national, state, and local level: women, violence prevention, and gun control. Our communities of color are especially affected, and there's a substantial burden placed on women and single-family households. The theme of my administration with the Links Incorporated is building a healthy legacy, our prescription for the future. As a medical doctor, I can tell you that the issue of gun violence affects us all, not only physically, but also in a very deep way, personally and socially. Violence is a public health issue. Violence prevention and gun control are significant initiatives that our administration wants to call attention to. One way that we are doing this is through today's Issues Forum. We bring together national and community leaders who are solution-focused and ready to start the conversation and take action, many having already moved the needle in our own way. To help introduce our illustrious panel, we have a very special guest. But before I get into that introduction, allow me to, for the links that happen to be in the room, could you please stand so we can see how many members of our organization have come out to support us today? Give yourselves a round of applause. I would like to recognize all of the members of what we call affectionately the DMV cluster for being hostesses today. And could you please give the members of the DMV cluster a round of applause, and thank you so much. Evaluation forms have already been handed out to you, so we're asking that you please complete those. It's the only way that we can know how what this experience was like for you and how to make it better next time. For those of you that happen to be Links, you will get 3 service hours for attending this session today. I am also very pleased and honored today to have so many of you here, but I'm also very pleased that many of the members of our executive team have also joined us. And I would like to acknowledge my national, or your national vice president, mine and yours, Kim Jeffers Leonard, our national treasurer, Carolyn Lewis, our national secretary, Crystal Kendrick, and would all members of the Executive Council please stand? I know we have our Chair of Communications, Pam Gentry. Oh, please. And our Interim Executive Director, Madeline Lawson, please stand. Joan Prince, Cheryl Jones, our chairs of program facets, and our Area Director, Natalie Fant from the Eastern area. If I forgot anyone, rank it up to my heart, please. Head is not totally functional right now, but so glad to see so many of you here today. Today, I have the opportunity to introduce to you our moderator. Simone Sanders is a rising star, an agent of change and an activist. She is a Democratic strategist and was National Press Secretary and primary spokesperson for the former presidential campaign of Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, no relation. Following the campaign, Simone was an advisor to the 2016 Democratic National Convention Committee. She has a passion for policy and fights to bring millennial perspectives to policy conversations. She has been featured on NPR, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, and others, and has been profiled in the Washington Post and Essence magazine, to name a few. Simone was recognized as one of 16 young Americans shaping the 2016 election by Rolling Stone magazine. And she is a very proud member of the Capital City chapter of the Links Incorporated. Please help me to welcome to the podium Simone Sanders.
Well, thank you, Lincoln. Another round of applause for our esteemed president. Before I hop into my remarks, it has been brought to my knowledge that we have a very special guest in the room. I'd like for you all to give a warm round of applause to Congressman Green, and we'd like to welcome him to the stage for a few remarks. Congressman Green. As he comes to the stage, we are so very honored to be joined by a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and we know you are very busy, sir, but we appreciate you stopping by with us and for all the work you're doing. Congressman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Would you give our MC a big hand, please? A bigger hand than that, please, just for me. Thank you. I have to acknowledge some people rather quickly, and of course, we tend to sometimes refer to ministers as the Right Reverend. I've always been uncomfortable with that term, the Right Reverend.
Me too.
But I am comfortable with this term when I refer to a specific member who is a minister, and that is the Righteous Reverend. The Righteous Reverend Barber. Would you give him a big expression for me, please? The Righteous Reverend. He has made morality something that we appreciate and that we celebrate, not only on Sundays, but other days, and especially on Mondays in his state. Again, thank you so much, Reverend. I have to do this because I'm a member of the NAACP, Reverend, and the Honorable Hazel Dukes is in the house, and I have to acknowledge Hazel. If I don't acknowledge Hazel, I can't go back to New York. My state senator, the Honorable Royce West, is in the house. My Sire Archon is in the house. Sire Archon Coleman?
Right here. Right here.
Okay, thank you. And of course, I have to acknowledge Dr. Harris. Thank you so much for your wonderful leadership and outstanding service to not only this entity, but also to our country. Dr. Harris, please, would you show her some love for me, please? Friends, I promise to be pithy and concise, terse and laconic. I do not plan to give your keynote speech today, although I must tell you this is the best looking audience I've seen in a long, long time. And I would, I'm tempted to say a few other things, something like I'm a single man, doctor, but I won't say that, you know. Good looking audience, all right. Oh, my chief of staff, Jackie Ellis, let's hear it. All right. My comments are these with reference to violence, especially as they relate to women. I have had the honor of filing a resolution annually in Congress along with the Honorable Ted Poe, recognizing October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I just want to cite a couple of statistics from the resolution. One that I find striking is that 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence at some point in her life. Another, on average, more than 3 women murdered are murdered by a husband or a boyfriend every day. Every day, more than 3 women. Another of females killed by firearms, 2/3 were killed by an intimate partner. And finally, the presence of a gun increases the risk of homicide by 500%. By 500%. So I close with these words. With these statistics, it is impossible for anyone to convince me that we don't need better firearm, better gun control, better laws to protect the public, better laws to protect women, better laws to protect people from gun violence in the United States of America. We need these laws. I'm sure you'll hear more about it, but I thank you for giving me this opportunity. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause for Congressman Green. He's got a very busy schedule. So I am so pleased to join you and the Links Incorporated, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, our very esteemed panel, and all of you who are taking the time to engage in this very important discussion today. I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska, and my first job out of college was working for the Empowerment Network as a community manager and community outreach manager. And one of the things that we did were called prayer walks. And every time that there was a homicide in the city, which unfortunately was very often, our organization would go out with some pastors and faith leaders, and literally that evening or maybe even the morning after, and we would go right to the site of the homicide, and we'd pray with the families. We'd bring the community out, and the first couple times I was working there, I'd always skip the prayer walks. But probably after the 4th or 5th time, they were like, you know, Ms. Simone, you need to come out to the prayer walk. So I stepped out, went out to the prayer walk, and it was alarming to see how the community is affected when a family is involved in a homicide, when someone loses their life. It's not just that family, it's the community. It's, you know, the people that live down the street, around the corner, the folks that own businesses, and they would all come out, they pray, people would be out there crying, and they talk about what can we do so this doesn't continue to happen in our communities. What is it? What is going on? Why us? So I tell you this story to illustrate the real challenges that we are up against. Now let me share some statistics on gun violence, because we believe with the links that we need to have information and data to inform our conversation. So first of all, firearm homicide is the leading cause of death for African Americans between the ages of 1 to 44. African Americans, secondly, African Americans make up nearly 13% of the United States population, but in 2009, African Americans suffered nearly 24% of all firearm deaths, and overall, 54% of all firearm homicides. And the last statistic I want to leave you with is abused women are 5 times more likely to be killed by their abuser if their abuser owns a firearm. So let's not forget that the victims of gun violence who became household names, and we're gonna say their names: Trayvon Martin, Jordan Davis, Michael Brown, Renisha McBride, Tamir Rice, Hadiah Pendleton, Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Walter Scott, the Charleston 9, the 5 Dallas police officers, and countless others. There are too many names to name here, too many people who lost their lives to gun violence, including the daughter of our first panelist, who we will hear from shortly. So this is a very, very complex issue, and this issue requires serious thought, serious discussion, and really our collective involvement. Somebody say it takes a village.
It takes a village.
So our speakers today represent that village. They represent many perspectives on the issues, from community activism to law enforcement to youth engagement to corporate America, and they're going to talk about how we can unite us all. So after we hear from this very esteemed panel, we definitely want to hear from you here in the audience, because this is an interactive group discussion, because it takes a village. Somebody say it takes a village. So we will open the discussion to Q&A, where you can ask our panel your own questions, and we will definitely get a dialogue going. So with that, I want to introduce our panel. Let's start off with a round of applause. So So our first panelist is Ms. Nardine Jeffries, and she is the founder and president of Stop Killing Innocent People, or SKIP as it's known. Her daughter, Brashelle Jones, was murdered here in Washington, D.C. by a young man with an AK-47. She has been active in the movement to prevent gun violence, and she is one of the mothers of the movement for presidential nominee Hillary Clinton's campaign. Our next panelist is Chief Val Demings. Chief Demings served as Orlando, Florida's first female chief of police. She rose from humble beginnings as the daughter, yes, we can clap for that. That is definitely something to clap for. She rose from humble beginnings as the daughter of a maid and janitor, and was the first person in her family to graduate from college. Under her leadership, Orlando experienced a 40% reduction in violent crime. Chief Demings is also a local member of the Orlando chapter of the Links Incorporated, and she is the Democratic candidate for Congress in Orlando. Give it up for Ms. Our next panelist is the Honorable Angela D. Also Brooks. She's the first woman to be elected state's attorney in Prince George's County, Maryland. Prosecution rates have risen under her leadership, and her office has been a major factor in the record crime reduction the country has seen over the last 4 years. This is the kind of work we have to be doing. In addition, Mrs. Al Brooks has led the fight to reduce domestic and family violence. Our next panelist is Mr. Wesley A. Coleman. He's grandsire archon of Sigma Pi Phi fraternity, aka the Grand Boulette. His career spans 35 years with some of the largest and well-known companies, including the Walt Disney Company, Nike Incorporated, and SC Johnson. His extensive volunteer and community involvement has focused primarily on youth and education. Next, we have Mr. Ronald C. Parker. He is president and CEO of the Executive Leadership Council, an organization that represents global black senior executives at Fortune 1000, Global 500, and equivalent companies. He has been a member of the Executive Leadership Council, also known as the ELC, since 1994. He retired from senior leadership at PepsiCo and is now focused on expanding the ELC globally. And last but certainly not least, we will hear from the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. He is the president of the North Carolina NAACP and pastor of Greenleaf Christian Church in Goldsboro, North Carolina. Reverend Barber and his coalition of more than 200 progressive organizations in North Carolina called together the Forward Together Moral Movement and have been the forefront of justice work in their state. Anybody heard of Moral Mondays? Yes. Well, their Moral Mondays movement is a multi-racial, multi-generational, and meant to battle against extreme policies on voting rights, women's rights, and much, much more. We will hear from Reverend Dr. Barber during the panel discussion, and he will also close our time together. Is anybody looking forward to that? Yes. Okay. Well, are y'all ready to get started? Well, we have asked each panelist to talk about the issue from their perspective and how they've experienced it, and then to share best practices from their own words. So without delay, I would like to welcome to the panel Ms. Nardine Jeffries, and she will come to the podium and share a story that is very near and dear to her heart. Please give her a warm round of applause. Ms. Jeffries. And I will be back.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As she stated, my name is Nardine Jeffries. I live here in Washington, D.C. in Ward 8. And March 30th started out as a normal day for me and my daughter. She asked to attend a funeral, and I allowed her to go to a funeral. And went to work. I thought it was, just like I said, another normal day. It's kind of abnormal, for my daughter had asked to attend several funerals within the last few weeks, and I had never experienced this as an adult growing up all over the country. My father was in the Army, so I had said no to a lot of the funerals, but for some reason I allowed her and her girlfriends who had spent the night before to attend a funeral. And they went and they made it home safely. I was heading out to go work out, so when I left my office, I didn't come straight home. My daughter had made it home, and she asked could she go back out and drop a backpack off. And I was kind of hesitant. I started feeling something wasn't right, but I allowed her to go. I went to work out. I started feeling something wasn't right again, and I reached for my phone to call Rochelle, and I didn't get an answer. And then the friend that I was working out with, phone rang, and I immediately grabbed her phone because her daughter was with mine, and she just started screaming that everyone was dead. Rochelle was dead, and I was like, what did you say? It just didn't make sense to me. But she was gunned down. It was 4 individuals in a van, and they used 3 different caliber weapons, a 9mm with an extended clip, an AK-47, and a .45. And they shot my daughter and 9 other people. 3 died at the scene, and 6 were injured. And I usually show Rochelle's autopsy picture, but I just thought I'd show you what she used to look like. I won't show the graphic picture, but every time I go on the Hill or have any kind of meetings with any elected officials, I bring her autopsy picture because that's what gun violence is to me. This is pre-gun violence, and as Simone stated, a village. And that is exactly what I had, and that is exactly what my daughter had. My neighbors in the front of our home watched the house if she was home by herself, and my neighbors in the back of me watched our home. And we all had each other's numbers. It was rare that Rochelle was home unattended by herself, but there were times where she had a half a day and her father would drop her off, and I'd be home in a couple of hours. And she was heading to Japan for ambassador program and then off to college. She was a whole year ahead of her class, but she never made it. And gun violence tears through me as a mother, but also her father. A lot of times, I think the press focuses on the mothers, but men are greatly impacted by this. My daughter's father tells me all the time I hugged her and kissed her every time I saw her, and that night before, I didn't give her a hug and a kiss. So he thinks about that last kiss and hug that he missed. My father fought for this country and used AK-47s, AR-15s, and all kind of huge weapons and tanks. And he didn't survive long enough to even make it to the trial. He was diagnosed with bladder cancer 6 months after my daughter was killed. He never spoke her name again. My mother had to remove pictures out of the room. He barely spoke at all. So by the time he was diagnosed with his condition, he was dead less than a year later. So my daughter was stolen from me, as well as my father and my future generations, because I have no other children, and I will never experience what my father and mother got to experience for 16 short years, which is the love of being a grandparent. I will never know what that's like. I will never get to visit my daughter in college. I will never get to know new friendships, relationships. And people think when you bury your child, that's the end. And it's a life sentence for me. Just like these individuals were sentenced to life, it's a life sentence for me. It's a struggle, a constant struggle. Just standing here talking about my daughter in the past tense is very hard. This is not the America that I grew up in. It is not the America that I even recognize. My daughter and 9 other people were gunned down about 11 miles from here in the nation's capital, doing nothing but, she went to drop a backpack off, and the prosecutors told me, your daughter's dead because she did her last act of kindness. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, the guys didn't have money for pizza. She was actually going home. And because the guys wanted some pizza, she walked across the street to Domino's and ordered a pizza. And after she gave them the pizza and put her earphones on, the van pulled up and just opened fire. And these are the same individuals who killed the guy whose funeral they had attended. So this was a retaliatory type of shooting. I'm mad because a bracelet wound up missing 8 days prior. That's how the first individual was shot. They had a shotgun that day and an AK-47, and they sprayed, and that young man was killed sitting in a car. He was not the intended target. But the point that I'm making is we have to do better as a society. Our communities are so under-resourced for so many things. This is truly a ripple effect. A lot of people may not know Brichelle's story. They may not know the other victim's story. There's so many stories, as Simone stated, that are out there. There are names that you may never hear, faces you may never see. But we have to do something different than what we're doing. This is definitely a public health crisis. The weapons of mass destruction are right here in our own communities, right here in our first world country, in our industrialized country. And that shouldn't be a norm for us. That shouldn't be acceptable. I've worked on legislation here after the children were killed called the South Capitol Street Memorial Tragedy Act Amendment of 2012. It's a pretty comprehensive piece of legislation, and it touches on mental health. There's teachers have to be trained to identify behavioral issues, and mental health providers are then referred to the students. It has a truancy piece in there, and that's kind of how, for me, people were like, well, how can you focus on legislation and doing all this stuff when you barely have gotten your child put in the ground? But I thank God for having still some of the essence of who I was prior to my child being killed, because as much as I love my daughter, ate dinner with her, did things that I just assumed everybody else was doing in the community, when I realized that's not the case. These children are hurting. They're being abused, they're being used, they're being everything you can think of in their homes. And when a juvenile justice facility is more appealing than a home life, there's something wrong. When hanging out on a corner is more satisfying to you than being in your own household, there's a serious problem. When going to a prison is like going to Club Med to you, there's a serious problem. And we have to start dealing with those issues. Guns are in our communities and they're too easily accessible. That is absolutely true. That is a fact. But what is making these individuals pick up these weapons in the first place? That's where we need to focus some of our energies as well, because my daughter lived in the same community these young men lived in, and that wasn't her story. She didn't talk about guns. She didn't own any guns. She didn't play video games that had guns. I monitored what was on television, what was in her iPod. But I realized that day that I live in a different world. We are in a culture, but then we have a subculture. And in that subculture, that's where it's very dangerous, because there's so many things going on within that subculture that we don't necessarily understand and recognize. So I'm not going to spend too much time. I know other panelists have to speak, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for allowing me to come today to share Brichelle's story and the rest of the young people killed on South Capitol Street. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms. Jeffries, for sharing your story and your daughter's story. Now I'd like to welcome Chief Val Demings, who, as a former police chief, is intimately familiar with where and how law enforcement fits into this equation. Chief Demings?
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. What a powerful story to have to follow. I think it reminds us all that it's more than just the 6 o'clock news. These are real people with real lives, real families, real hopes, real dreams for Brichelle. And let's give Ms. Jeffries another round of applause for having the strength to tell that story. I want to thank the Congressional Black Caucus for its leadership in addressing issues that really matter. Also want to thank our wonderful national president and all of you, my Link sisters, for being here on this very important matter. But everybody who's here, it demonstrates that you care about what's going on in your communities. And I guarantee you, we may look to our elected officials, and yes, they have a major role to play, but I believe the answer, I know for a fact that the answer to the majority of the challenges that we face really are in this room. So thank you. I also want to acknowledge, I have to do this, I want to acknowledge a young man who I watched grow up in church, and he is now traveling all over the place, doing a lot of work, trying to make a difference, make things better with the NAACP. And please join me, and it's a good thing when young people are doing that. Stephen Green, please give him a round of applause. I spent several years as a social worker in Jacksonville, Florida. And then I spent 27 years at the Orlando Police Department. Had the honor of working my way up through the ranks, started out as a patrol officer working midnight shift, riding around in a patrol car, and had the honor of working my way up through the ranks to become Orlando's first female chief of police. I'm married to the sheriff of Orange County. We have a real interesting family. I am the mother of 3 sons, 3 precious sons. One of them is a firefighter, one's a teacher, and one's in business. So I've seen this issue that we are talking about from the eyes of a social worker, from the eyes of a law enforcement officer, from the eyes of someone in charge of the agency, but more importantly, from the eyes of a wife and a mother of 3 sons. I come to you from Orlando, Florida. You know it, it's the happiest place on earth. It at least houses a place that's known as the happiest place on earth. It has the nickname of the city beautiful. City beautiful. It is the 4th largest city in Florida, and it is a place where 66 million visitors press their way to enjoy just last year, which makes it the world's premier tourist destination. It is a diverse community. Find a little bit of everybody there. We have a population about 41% white, about 25% Hispanic, about 28% African American, about 4% Asian. And then we have an LGBT community that is about 4%. It's known as a place that is very accepting and tolerant of our LGBT community. Now, I tell you all of that to just let you know, though, that violence will seize any opportunity to show its ugly head. It cares nothing about a place that houses the happiest place on earth or a place that is very tolerant and accepting. It will raise its ugly head wherever it can fester and take hold. The year before I was appointed chief, which was 2007, our murder rate rose 122%. The overwhelming majority, about 89% of those murders, were committed with persons carrying firearms. If we look at the victims, and you all probably already know this, but sometimes we have to constantly and consistently remind you so we can help to eliminate stories like Rochelle's. The overwhelming majority of the victims are persons 25 years old or younger. The overwhelming majority of the suspects, the perpetrators, are, guess what, 25 years old or younger. And how do this phenomena affect communities of color? Well, about 81% of the victims are black males. About 81% of the suspects are black males. When I was appointed chief, welcome to the chief's office, Our homicides the year before rose 122%. So we launched an all-out war, as you can imagine, on violent crime. We made it our #1 priority. But that was nothing if we did not also make our second priority reduction of crime guns from our streets, and especially assault rifles, because you know we allowed the assault weapons ban to expire in 2004. But one thing I realized, I knew it, having worked as a social worker and certainly knew it as a chief of police, that I couldn't get there. I couldn't reduce that crime rate without the community getting involved. Not just being angry and being mad, because we all are. You know, the police were angry and mad too. But the police, the community working together, and community good citizens stepping up and doing some things to improve the quality of life in crime-ridden communities. So we did things like sponsored GED programs, because we knew that 68% of the people in U.S. prisons did not graduate high school. Could that be a clue of the important role that education plays in keeping our children on the right track? We started a youth mentoring program at the police department to give kids an alternative during those bewitching hours when they're out of school and unsupervised. We did a lot of things to improve the quality of life, raise money for scholarships, but we also know everybody's not going to college. It's a great thing for those who do, but all of our kids aren't going, so we partnered with different groups to implement job skill training, so kids, when they graduated, would have alternatives, either go to college or hit the ground running going to school. But violence will attach itself to any community, and you all watched on June 12th of this year when Orlando, Florida, the place where 66 million people pressed their way, had the deadliest mass shooting in the history of our nation. Now, Reggie, I'm still in shock about that one. It's hard to believe that a shooting, and we hear it in other cities, other states, but not Orlando, Florida. When one person, a lone gunman, a lone wolf, walked into a nightclub where my bishop likes to say a group of young people were having a late night fellowship. That's what my bishop said, Reverend Barber. That's a good way to put it. I wish we'd had late night fellowships when I was in college, because maybe my mother would have allowed me to participate a lot more in them. But a late night fellowship walked through the door and opened fire. One person with 2 firearms, one a handgun and the other a 6-hour MCX assault rifle, very similar to an AK-47 and an AR-15. Now, as we talk about gun legislation, as we talk about it, let me just remind you, and Mrs. Jeffries said it so well, the conversation is not about responsible gun owners. We're not allowing the gun lobby to hijack the conversation and go down that road, because it has nothing to do with law-abiding citizens having the right to bear arms. But when I was police chief, I did everything I could to take 3,300 crime guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have had them in the first place. The discussion is about keeping guns out of the hands of criminals and the mentally ill. Now, this lone gunman who walked in the late night fellowship opened fire with his handgun and his assault rifle. And I had an opportunity to talk with one of the emergency room doctors after the horrific incident, who said that it was quite obvious those who had been shot with a handgun. Guns are designed to kill, by the way, in case they're designed to kill. But he said it was quite obvious those who had been shot with the handgun versus those who had been shot with the assault rifle. Assault rifles are designed for the battlefield.
That's right.
They are good at doing what they were designed to do. And that is to not only kill, but to completely destroy. They were designed to defeat the enemy. They were not designed for people to use in our neighborhoods and on our streets and against our children. So let's very quickly, I'll close with this, looking at the gun legislation that is before us. Universal background checks. If you want to drive a car, own a car, you want to own a car, you've got to have a registration for that vehicle. Why not have universal background checks for law-abiding citizens, if that's what you are, to carry a firearm? Is that an unreasonable request? I think not. Assault rifles. We've already talked about that. The ban on assault rifles expired in 2004. We need to do everything we can to have the ban on assault rifles reinstituted. And then what about, you're too dangerous to fly?
That's right, that's right.
You ought to be too dangerous to buy. Now we are a free society, but we are an educated society. We are smart people. And if you are too dangerous to get on an airplane,
Come on.
you really ought to be too dangerous to walk in any gun store or gun shop or gun show and buy a firearm. So I'll close with this, just a reminder that the answer to our problems, the police play a major role. But you may remember in Dallas, Chief David Brown said this: sometimes we ask the police to do too much. Sometimes we ask our government to do, sometimes we depend on government too much. The answers to our issues really rest in the hands of the people. So thank you so much. I look forward to our discussions, and God bless you all.
Sounds to me like Chief Demings was saying it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
All right, well, next we will hear from Mr. Wesley A. Coleman. His organization has been extremely active in the community, and we are hoping to hear what they're doing to help shield young people from gun violence. Mr. Coleman, thank you so much.
All right, man.
Y'all give a round of applause, Mr. Coleman.
Good morning and welcome. And I'm here to represent Sigma Pi Phi, known as the Boule. And I see a couple of my colleagues in the audience I'd like to recognize. Our past Grand Sire Khan from Oakland, Robert Harris. And our current Chairman of Public Policy from Dallas, Royce West. Now in the Boule, we have about 5,000 members and 133 affiliate, we don't call them chapters, but member Boules. And we've been around since 1904. And for most of our history, we've talked about social action, and that's been a big part of our programs. And in recent years, our focus has been very much on saving our black youth, especially our black males. And we feel that we have to get to our young people at an early age. You've heard these statistics already talked about today. So we feel it's our obligation as a group of 5,000 men who have attained some success in life that we have to give back and help the next generation. So we have a number of programs, and I want to talk about a few of those and show you the types of things that we're trying to do. Now, our overall theme for this biennium that I'm serving as Grand Sire Khan, or it's the same as the national president, is inspiring our youth to succeed. And we hope to take these young men and take them from boys to men. And we say men, if you spell the word men, M-E-N, M for mentoring, E for education, and N for networking. And doing those three things, we hope, will help our youth become men and be a meaningful and successful part of society. Now, In Watts, in the Los Angeles area, I live in Los Angeles, our member boule goes into the Watts Willowbrook Boys and Girls Club. It's in a tough part of town. And in fact, it's so bad that the club itself has certain doors that certain members, depending on what street they live on, have to enter, because once they leave the safe confines of the club, they are at risk. So what we do every year is pick 25 young middle schoolers, and we feel we have to start with them that young if we're going to make a real impact and keep them from being a statistic. And when we first get them together, we ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would say of the 25 boys, probably 22 of them want to be either pro basketball players or pro football players. And the other 2 or 3 want to be rappers. So we say, okay, that's fine, but what's your second choice? And what's your next option? Well, I don't know. So our goal is to work with them over the course of a year to show them that there's more to life than possibly being a football player or a rapper, because you know the statistics, the odds are not in the favor that they'll be successful. So what do? We spend time with them, getting to know them as one-on-one with each boy, but we also try to show them another side of life. We spend time just talking about what we do in our careers. And then we take them and try to expose them to things that they don't get a chance to see. For instance, we have a good relationship with the police chief in LA. He invites them down to the police station and shows them what a police station looks like if you're not coming in the back door to the jailhouse. That's right. We also take them to the courthouse. We have members who are judges. He takes them in his chambers. And it was so interesting. On one of the sessions, when we took our boys to his courtroom, he had on trial 2 young men, slightly older than our boys, who were on trial for a gang murder. He took them into the lockup, the room that you never see on TV, and closed the door on them and let them sit there for a few minutes to know what happens if you shoot someone. So we try to expose them. We take them to the airport. The Tom Bradley terminal in LAX is named after one of our late members, Tom Bradley. And we show them businesses, and that some of our members happen to have businesses in the airport. And we try to give them the exposure that there are lots of opportunities. We take them to a college campus, because many of them have never gotten past the 20 blocks of South Central LA. And at the end of the year, we ask them to make a 2 to 3 minute speech on what you want to do in life. But before we do that, one of our members is a minister, and he prepares them to give presentations. And believe me, the first time they stand up at the mic, you know, they're standing all sideways, and they aren't looking up, and they're really, you know, just don't have an idea how to make a public speech. And he works with them because of all his years in the pulpit, and prepares them to make the speech. And at the closing program, we have all the parents there, and we ask them, what do you want to be in life? And it makes us so proud when at the end of a year, not one boy says their #1 goal is to be a professional athlete. So we feel we've reached them in some way. And we also find that the more we show up, the more we show interest, the more open they become to us. And they really ask you some pretty tough questions about, well, I see so-and-so's a lawyer. Well, what does that mean? How do you get to be a lawyer? You know, I've seen TV shows, but I really never thought about what it takes to be a lawyer, because I never even thought about that as a career option. So it's so important that we take our time and go into our communities and not only show up and show interest, but also show them how. And we also have one other program that we're looking to expand or really start on a wide-scale basis. We have a lot of retired military in our ranks, people who were generals or colonels, and you know, they teach a lot of great leadership in the military. And we want to tap into that expertise and put together programs that we can put across the country that can help our young men learn about leadership and learn what it means to be a man. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Now, I want to know if corporate America has a voice in the debate over gun control. I don't know. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Ronald Parker to give us the answer to that question. And Mr. Parker, I know you're used to being on deadlines in the boardroom, so I'm going to put you on a time deadline so we can stay timely, about 7 to 8 minutes. So we're going to see if you can pass this corporate test.
Thank you very much. On the behalf of the 600 members who represent the Executive Leadership Council, it is an honor to be here, and I too applaud the Congressional Black Caucus for holding this gathering to convene and for us to collectively address this issue. And yes, as a businessman, I do know how to be on time, but also I know how to be on budget. I bring you greetings from my wife, who is a link. I guess I am a connecting link. Paula Parker, who is in Dallas, and my good Senator West. Senator West, thank you for being here, who I know is a part of the Boule, and several of the EOC members. I see Karen Morrison, who is from Ohio here, and I think Kim is here as well, and some other EOC members, and our staff member, Michael Dutton, who some of you know. Let me just share with you within the 5 minutes I have left. 3 years ago, Ann Fudge and I and Dr. Price Cobb had a meeting with some young people from Ferguson. And as we were going around and sharing with each other the organizations that we represent, and this was for the grand jury verdict. And as I was sharing with this young group of people from Ferguson, this young lady in particular, that we were the Executive Leadership Council, the baddest brothers and sisters on the planet. No disrespect to the Lynx or to the Archon. But our organization consists of CEOs, both past and present, black CEOs. There are only 5 of them who are running Fortune 500 companies. One of them is the only black female, Ursula Burns. Why do I say that? In this conversation with this young lady from Ferguson, now that you have the backdrop of the Executive Leadership Council, she looked at me and she said, "You abandoned us." And she was right. Because my generation that aspired to be in the world of corporate America decided to do a drive-by the neighborhoods that we used to live in as adults, that we had examples of, like the Royce Wesses of the world, the Good Reverend of the world, the Wes Colemans of the world, the Glenda Harrises of the world. We moved around and moved into predominantly white neighborhoods because it was a reflection of our accomplishments as executives. So one of the things we do within the Executive Leadership Council, we have thrown down the gauntlet. And it said it's our time for the black voice of corporate America to speak out. Why is that important? In our communities where, and let's not forget the domestic violence piece that's connected to guns. There is a toxic culture that has entered our communities, our black communities, where toxic masculinity is displaying itself in violence against our most sacred partner,
Yes, sir.
our black women, who need to stand beside us even more so today as we go further into corporate America and use our collective power to not only change strategies at the board level, which is one of our key initiatives, because at the board level is where they make decisions on investments, on where to spend your hard-earned money as shareholders. And because of that, only 8% of all boards are represented by black people. Only 2% of board positions are represented by black women. And we all know that black women make 98% of the purchasing decisions of every household in the black community. I can't get a flat screen television in my home office without going through CEO Paula Parker, Chief Operating Officer Lauren Parker, and Treasurer Lola the dog before I can get any type of voice in my household. So with that being said, what we are doing inside the EOC, members like Ken Chenault, Ken Frazier, Ursula Burns, Ann Fudge, Clarence Otis, Bernard Tyson, who's the CEO of Kaiser Permanente, Valerie Lewis, who's a part of the Lynx, but also the Assistant General Counsel at Aberson. These black, powerful people are going to use their power, their voice to say enough is enough. We will invest through our corporate social responsibility efforts of not only microloans in India and places abroad, but we will take and reverse those microloans back into our communities to help our young people. That's what we're doing about it. And we are also advocating that there should be more board representation. If we're going to spend $1.5 trillion of our hard-earned money with these corporations, we want $1 trillion of our voices heard when we make decisions on where to spend that money. So with that, as I close, we like to say at the EOC, if not now, when? And if not us, who? Thank you.
I think Mr. Parker successfully answered my question. So we've heard from different sides of corporate America, and we've also heard from a side of law enforcement, but there's another side of law enforcement I'm going to bring to the mic right now, because the state's attorney's office plays a pivotal role in this fight against violence in our communities. So now we would like to welcome to the stage for a perspective from that. Miss Angela Alsobrooks, who is, again, the first African-American woman who was elected state's attorney. Give her a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all can do better than that.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to start by thanking the ladies of Lynx Incorporated for hosting what is a really important conversation, and to say that I'm honored to be here among these other esteemed panelists. I want to also thank my parents, James and Patricia Alsobrooks, who are here, and our family friend Bobby Mayers, who came down this afternoon. And what I have to tell you about that is they are my staunchest supporters, but they made it very clear this afternoon they did not come to hear me, they came to hear Reverend Barber. Said to me, I said, I'm going to be speaking on this panel. They said, oh, honey, that's wonderful. I said, Reverend Barber will be there. They said, what time? So they are here to hear Reverend Barber, as many of us are. And so I want to say just one more time before we move on. We heard today from a mother. And all of us who sit in this room, we are in very different spaces talking about this issue. It is a very different experience for a mother to have poured out her heart the way that Mrs. Jeffries did today about her daughter. I'm the mother of a daughter, my only child as well, and I just cannot imagine. So if you would help me give her another round of applause for sharing so powerfully her story today. And in the few minutes that I have, much as she shared the story of Michelle, I want to remind us, just to bring it all back to focus again, who we're talking about. Again, these are not numbers, they are not alphabets, these are humans. And I want to just talk about two babies who I think also refocus us on this issue around guns and violence. And when I talk about Layla Miller, and I think some of you, especially those who are from Prince George's, have heard us talk before about 3-year-old Layla Miller, who just nearly 2 years ago was riding along. Her dad came to pick her up from her grandparents' house. He was in a dispute with her mother and went over to the grandparents' house and shot her great-grandmother and her grandfather and took Layla out of that home. He got her in a car and drove up a road, and Layla, they pulled on the side of the road, and when he took a selfie with him and his baby, she smiled in the selfie because she was there and she trusted her daddy. Whereupon he slit her throat and shot her in the head right there on the side of that road. They later discovered that he, of course, was a person who was suffering from mental illness. But Layla Miller, I think, really brings into focus, again, who we are talking about when we talk about guns and violence in our community. It's not just Layla. Chloe Davis, another young baby, 2 years old, was sitting in her car last year with her, actually the beginning of this year, with her mother, headed to go off to her grandmother's house as her mother was planning to go to work, when her father showed up, opened the door, and executed her right there in her car seat, and shot her mother because he was upset about being charged with paying $600 per month child support. This is what we're talking about when we talk about guns and violence, and the true impact that it is having on our community is the children. So I want to spend my few moments talking about children. And it is really my opinion that when we judge our society, I think that we will be judged based on how we care for our children. That really, to me, is the true health of any community. I think you can look directly at how we care for our children, and the fact that so many of our children are dying day in and day out at the hands of not strangers, because most of these babies are dying at the hands of people they know, love, and trust. In fact, we have 1 in 3 homes in the United States has a firearm, and nearly 1.7 million children in the United States live in a home with an unlocked, loaded firearm. Yep. On top of that, we know that over 111,000, and we just look at how many people in this room, can you imagine 111,000 people are victims of gun violence every year, and out of that number, 17,000 of those victims are children, and 2,000 of our children are killed with firearms every year in the United States. These numbers, to me, are staggering. What this means is 48 of our children every day are victims of gun violence. And so this is, for me, an epidemic. And again, when we start talking about what it means for us, it means we don't look over there or behind us. We look right in our own community, because the people who are killing these folks are not strangers. They're people known to them. When we talk about African Americans, we have to say it as well. You heard the statistic that we comprise 13% of the population and over 50% of the homicide victims every year. Over 50%. And they are killed. 93% of all African Americans who are killed by other African Americans. This, I think, is something that ought to be of really great concern to us. But there are solutions. I was so pleased when I heard the chief speak. First of all, I'm just pleased because she's a chief, and I'm just really, really amazed and inspired by that. But she talked about some of the things she believes that we can do to really address this epidemic, some of the legislative measures that can be taken. And I'm proud to say that Maryland really has been a leader in this regard in terms of firearm safety. In fact, we have the 4th strictest gun laws in the country, and we worked hard for this. And so in 2013, Maryland passed what's known as the Maryland Firearm Safety Act. One part of this act that I am especially proud of is it addresses mental illness. To me, it is so unloving and uncaring that we have not done more to protect individuals who are suffering from mental illness. To allow a handgun in the hands of a person who is mentally ill is so irresponsible, and it is uncaring. Yet we have done very little to address it. Maryland took the really bold step of trying to address mental illness and also to address the issue of disqualified individuals, criminals who are allowed to possess guns. We've done a few things. One is fingerprinting. This came, and it wasn't easy for us to have it accomplished, but now those who wish to purchase a handgun must be fingerprinted. And the reason that this is so important is there's a whole epidemic regarding straw purchasing, which means you know you're disqualified, so you have girlfriend, boyfriend, aunt, or some other individual who will show up and purchase that gun for you at a fee. Yep. Now, when we start requiring your fingerprint, suddenly you say, maybe not. I don't know that I will purchase that gun for you. So the fingerprinting and a complete certified training class are also required in Maryland. The training class, again, and you've heard the analogy, which I think is a great one, that we are required to take training to drive automobiles, but not to handle a handgun. This is ridiculous, but in Maryland it is no longer the case. You do have to be fingerprinted and also have to attend a training course. Also, individuals who have been involuntarily committed to a mental health facility, those individuals are now disqualified from owning handguns. We think this is also very, very important, and that the communication regarding those individuals is more seamless, that it now goes into a database so that we know who we're talking about. In addition to that, there's a whole issue around stolen firearms. This is another issue, and so now you have 72 hours to to report a stolen handgun. And on your first offense, there's a civil penalty, and on the second offense, it's a crime. And so if you are a person who legally possesses a handgun, but it goes stolen, you now have 72 hours to report that, because that handgun is now out there for some disqualified individual to use against one of us, and so that is a part of it as well. And then you heard about the high-capacity weapons that, again, I agree, are for the battlefield. Well, Maryland has taken the really bold step of now requiring that magazine capacity has to be no more than 10. In other words, you cannot sell in the state of Maryland a magazine capacity that has more than 10 pieces of ammunition in it. We believe that this is really, really important. And so this is an issue that can be addressed, must be urgent to us in so many ways. And I'll say two final things. Hurt people hurt people. Yes. And this is a fact. Hurt people hurt people. And so it is no mystery how this all begins. And again, it goes back to what we're saying about how we care for our children. There are two places that we must insist. One is education, because 80% of all of the violent offenders that we prosecute in our courthouse are individuals who have dropped out of high school. It is no mystery what's happening with our children. And then the other area is trauma. How many of our children are witnessing trauma in their own homes every day? We know that boys who witness violence are more than twice as likely to repeat it. And young girls who witness violence are likely as well to become victims themselves. Hurt people, uneducated people who lack hope and lack opportunity, guess where they end up? There is a pipeline that goes directly from a failed education directly to the courthouse. And we understand it, we must disrupt it, and we must remove these weapons that are really tearing apart our community. So thank you again for engaging in this very important conversation, and I thank you for allowing me to be a part of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is the power that Maryland has in the state's attorney's office. Another round of applause. All right, now we've been talking about It Takes a Village, and I'm not sure how many of you watched our last panelist at the Democratic National Committee earlier this summer. But if you didn't, you need to YouTube it. Go to YouTube, type in Reverend Barber, because it was absolutely amazing. You know, Reverend Barber suggests a way toward tackling this issue, and it starts with bringing us all together. So without further ado, I would like for you all to give a warm round of applause to Reverend Dr. William Barber.
First, let's applaud our dear sister who in so many ways represents so much that's good with our country. Let's applaud her. Let me thank you, Madam President, for this opportunity to be here with this panelist. I'm just flying in today from Houston, and let me thank my dear sister Hazel Dukes, who is such a strong voice and a part of our work in civil rights. I want to, in these few minutes, just pass some things. I want to put some things out there for thought. Any one of them could be a full course. First thing, I want to thank our moderator for calling the names that she called at the beginning, because it shows and reveals the complexity of this issue. She called some who were killed by other African Americans. She called some who were killed by other perpetrators who were not African Americans. And then she called some that were killed by the police. And that's why when we talk about this issue of gun violence, it's difficult. And I want to try to talk about it in parts. I think you sometimes have to separate the two parts out. I think about it, my sister who talked to us about the funeral and the killing of her daughter. What brings me here today is, first of all, some years ago, at a funeral, there was a retaliation, similar to what she said, of a killing in Goldsboro. Someone killed somebody, and then as they were in the funeral procession of the person that had been killed, there was a retaliation. So there was a funeral and a death in the midst of the funeral. And some of us got together as preachers and started something called Stop the Funerals. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking about Jonathan Farrell. In Charlotte, young man, home from college, football player, great student, has an accident, has a concussion, he's disoriented, he goes to a house and knocks for help. The person sees a big black young man and automatically assumes that he's some kind of aggressor, calls the police, and a policeman that wasn't even supposed to be there, who actually was on the K-9 duty, shows up and on video shoots Jonathan Farrell 9 times, kills him. He is charged with murder, and just this year there was a hung jury. And while I have deep respect for my Attorney General, in many ways we had to challenge him, because you know the NAACP has no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, only permanent interests. When he came out in public and said that the hung jury meant the jury had spoken. Now, are there any lawyers in here? Because I don't think there's a lawyer in here would declare that a hung jury is a spoken jury. A hung jury is a hung jury, which means you're supposed to go back and try it. And yet, this man, this was not retried. Both of these incidences resulted in death. We know the statistics. We now see more people killed in our community by us than were killed by the KKK. We also know that we only about 12% of the population, but we make up 1.5 million of the prison population of black and brown people, as Michelle Alexander likes to remind us. We also know that we're only 12% of the population, but we're 41% of unarmed people shot by the police. This is not an easy issue, nor is it a new issue. The first flag that waved outside of the NAACP office in 1909 said another Negro was lynched today. And the NAACP was very careful about that. They did not say hung, because black people weren't hung. We were lynched. So very different in terms of being hung and being lynched. Lynch was a form of legalized terrorism. And it wasn't until 1920 that the first laws against lynching were put on the books. And interestingly, the man that led the fight for the first lynching laws came from Ferguson, St. Louis, Missouri. And after he led the fight, he was then put out of the U.S. Congress by people who voted him out because of his concern about black people. This violence thing is an American construct. You cannot deal with violence until you deal with something Dr. King said. Now, when he said it, 150 newspapers denounced him the next day. The NAACP denounced him, and other civil rights organizations and unions. Later on, we reclaimed it, but on April 5th, 1967, a lot of people were mad with Dr. King because he dared, as a preacher and a prophet, to say we had a moral problem around militarism, materialism, and racism. And then he said to America, you have been the greatest purveyor of violence in the history of the world. Now, they didn't want to hear that. But America is a violent culture. We know that. We need to hear what Jesus said in Luke 14. You know, the only time Jesus raised people from the dead was when they died too young, except for Lazarus. Jesus didn't just go around raising people from the dead. He raised people from the dead when they died too young. He was always angry at young death. Luke 7, he shakes the funeral procession and raises up a young man and gives him back to her mother. In the Bible, when Jesus was born, you remember children were being killed to try to stop him, a brown-skinned Palestinian Jew, from coming into full maturity. And the scripture said the sound of Rachel could be heard weeping because her children were no more. I want to suggest that one of the things we have to have in this culture, if you're going to deal with the culture of violence, women have a particular role, because in ancient Israel, it was the mourning women, the powerful and prophetic tears of women who would not allow a culture to keep on doing something without hearing their voice, that always were called on by God to change that society. Always. And we know America has a violent construct. I mean, well, today, right here today, you know what today is? Today is the anniversary of the bombing of the Birmingham church. Today. Today, in 1963, 53 years ago, children, mothers would be crying right now in Birmingham, Alabama, because 4 girls were blown up while they were studying the Sunday school lesson, Love Your Enemies. It's a violent contract, and we who are African American have known this violence. We know Emmett Till. Why was the March on Washington held on August 28th? Because August 28th was the anniversary of Emmett Till's death. And Mamie Till would not close that casket. She said, I'm gonna make you look at this death. I'm gonna make you see what violence and racism will do. And then just before the March on Washington, we talk about the March on Washington, but we forget Medgar Evers was killed almost 2 months before the March on Washington. The same night that John F. Kennedy announced he was going to push the Civil Rights Act, Medgar Evers was shot with a .30-06 Deer rifle through the back, through the heart, and Merle Evers told us that even the bullet was racist, because when it finished going all over the house, it landed beside the watermelon on the counter. So if you're going to deal with violence, you have to first acknowledge that this American culture has a violent construct. Has a violent construct. That's why Coretta Scott King on one occasion said this when somebody asked Coretta what did she think about gun violence, since her husband's had been killed by an assassin. His vertebrae was severed when the bullet went through the front of his jaw. And Coretta said, yes, that's violence, but in this culture, you have to look at violence much deeper. She said, not only is gun violence violence, but ghetto housing is violence. She said, depriving young people of education is violence. She said, not paying people a living wage is violent. She said, police brutality is violent. She said the lack of health care is violence. Denying people union rights is violence. And then she said, even an apathetic attitude and a refusal to deal with injustice is a form of violence. So let me suggest some things. I won't delve into them too much when we talk about this ending of gun violence. One of the things, there's several P's, I put them in P's just to remember them, is if we're going to deal with gun violence, we have to deal with the proliferation of guns. And we're going to have to break the unholy power that the NRA has over our legislative processes in this country. And we're going to have to tell some truth. You know, the NRA wasn't what it was when it's beginning. It actually was started by 2 Northern Yankees who founded the NRA because they believed that the Civil War went on too long because the Northerners couldn't shoot. But early on, it was the NRA promoted gun control. Watch this now. The NRA in the 1920s wrote most of the legislation on gun control. Now, when did they move from wanting gun control to a proliferation of guns? Let me make it simple. I don't have time to do the dissertation on it. When black folk got guns. I'm through now. You can go read the rest of it. But that's when it happened. When the Black Panthers walked in to the legislative building in California, that's when the NRA said, wait a minute, too many black folk are getting guns. So if we're going to deal with it, we have to deal with the proliferation of guns. Also, we have to deal with the provision of drugs. You cannot mix guns and drugs and think you're not going to have death. And we have to deal with the proliferation of the provision of drugs, and we cannot let people say we don't know who's bringing the drugs in, because we have satellites that can see you right now from 100 miles in the sky. Number 3, we have to deal with the poverty of our schools. You heard, I think the chief said that the number of people that are in prison who do not have a good education. You cannot deal with the violence without dealing with the poverty of our schools. No society that's serious about creating a better society would defund schools. No society that's serious about creating a better society would privatize schools and take public money and put it in private schools that most people can't even go to. You wouldn't do that. Number 4, we must prosecute the violent. Don't ever think that black people don't believe in strong prosecution. What we don't believe in is unequal prosecution. The next one, we must deal with the pushing out of economic development. We cannot deal with the issues of violence if we push all the economic development out of the inner cities and out of rural communities. We must, in fact, figure ways to bring infrastructure and economic development into communities. And we must deal with the persistence of poverty, the persistence of poverty, the systemic nature of poverty. You know, right now, we give corporate crooks free money when they mess up, but we lock up people who want $15 in a union. Think about that now. We lock up people who want $15 a minute, which is not even a 21st century living wage, because the 21st century living wage, according to the Economic Policy Institute, would be $22 an hour. So they're actually asking for $7 less than what it would be if it kept up with inflation. That's a form, Otto Schwammer calls that attention violence. He's an MIT professor. He says we have a serious economic problem, and it's called consciousness. We have become violent in the way we deal with the issue of poverty and persistent poverty. And whenever you have this level of poverty, people end up having what we call pre- and post-traumatic syndrome. In fact, a psychologist has said that what poor people experience is dots. They don't experience post-traumatic syndrome. They experience dots, daily ongoing traumatic syndrome. They don't even have opportunity. And when you mix all of that stress with the drugs, with the access to gun, somebody's gonna get killed. And then we have to deal with policy change. I say to the Links, Madam President, if the Links are serious about this issue as any issues, we're gonna have to get these pumps on Capitol Hill. And some of y'all might have to get arrested in your pumps. I'm just gonna tell you, if you're serious about this, it's all right to come to the CBC Legislative Day where everybody dressed up, but we're gonna have to come back and maybe sit in McConnell's office or sit in Ryan's office. You know, in other words, you're gonna have to be like those mourning women, like Rachel in the Bible, who said, I will not stop mourning as long as my children are no more. I'm serious. We might have to have some doctors and some lawyers and some teachers get arrested, because see, here's the connection. The same people that are against voting rights and are against health care reform and who fight President Obama on everything and who are against fully funding public education and who are against the LGBTQ community and who are against the immigrant community are the same people who are against dealing with the proliferation of guns. You check the record. The same people that vote in that way are also voting and stopping the kind of legislation that the chief said we need. She just said, if you can't fly, you ought not be able to buy a gun. Go check the people who are voting against that legislation. They're the same ones voting against voting rights. They're the same ones voting against health care. They're the same ones voting against public education. And they are not moved by a text message. And at some point, if you are upset about death, you have to do like Jesus and shake the casket. We may need some sisters in pumps to be pallbearers. Line up 1,000 caskets and bring them to Capitol Hill. I'm just saying, y'all asked me, so I'm just saying, because the people we're dealing with are not worried about black death. In fact, sometimes, I wasn't going to say this, but let me say it. Sometimes the folk we dealing with actually show us right in our face that black death means more than black life. Watch this, watch this. You remember when they took the flag down in South Carolina? And how everybody got happy? That was the most racist thing I ever seen in my life. I know y'all, I knew it was gonna get quiet. They took the flag down and said the flag is coming down after the deaths at Mother Emanuel. Now, the NAACP had been boycotting for 20 years. You didn't bring the flag down because we told you it was wrong. The governor said, now that 9 folk have died, we're gonna bring, so what you're saying is black death matters. You didn't listen to black life. You didn't listen to a living NAACP president saying that flag. It took 9, and then you degrade black life by saying that all you get for 9 lives is a flag that shouldn't have never been up in the first place. You better hear what I'm saying. 9 deaths, and that state still didn't pass better gun laws. 9 deaths, and that state still didn't accept Medicaid expansion. 9 deaths, and that state still didn't agree to raising the minimum wage to 15. 9 deaths, and that state still pushed voter suppression. 9 deaths, and they did not even pass the piece of legislation that Representative Pinckney was fighting for the night he came to the church. He was late because he was fighting for more money for public education. So what you said to us by having the Confederate flag come down and then have black police officers folded is that black death means more than black life. And if that isn't enough to prove to us that we might have to do some things that are a little unorthodox. Because you know, if you have Congress people and senators and legislators who themselves get free health care, but then won't allow the people that got elected them to get free health care, and that most of the people that would benefit from the Medicaid expansion are white, you know if they don't care about the white folk. Living. And it just may take this to happen. And then that other part, and I'm through, is that's one side. But the other side is we cannot accept where some hide behind a badge and kill black men and women and children. That's right. And there is a distinction between that. Sometimes people say, well, you ought to be concerned about black on black death. Well, you ought to be concerned about white on white death too, since most white people kill white people, most black. But that does not negate people with a badge killing unarmed black men, women, and children. Because when you have the power of the state and a badge that gives you the power to come in my house at night and take one of my children out, that's the only person that can come in my house and take one of my children or my wife out, and I say, baby, I'll meet you downtown, I'll call the lawyer. But anybody else, it's gonna be a problem, and I'm nonviolent, but my cane isn't. But I'm nonviolent, but But anybody else, it's going to be a problem. But if you have a badge, you can come in my house, knock on my door, show me a piece of paper, take my son, my daughter, my wife out, and that's too much power for a bigot. And when you can get shot because you had a broken tail light, shot because you had on a hoodie, shot because you're selling CDs, or even shot when you're trying to comply and show somebody that you have the proper credentials to carry a weapon. And it's not, we're not against police. That's a false narrative.
That's right.
Huh? Good cops don't like bad cops.
That's right.
Because bad cops make it bad for good cops. We're not anti-police. That's ridiculous. What we're anti is assassination on the spot. Real law enforcement helps the community. Bad law enforcement puts a psychic hole in the community. And it's amazing to me how some commentators and even some politicians want to say that Black Lives Matter, for instance, is, first of all, it ain't new. We've always fought the Black Lives Matter. That's what Billie Holiday was singing about when she sung about that strange fruit. Huh? This is just the 21st remix of Black Lives Matter. 21st century remix. But to suggest that it's just black folk against the police, don't y'all see all those white people marching in Black Lives Matter marches? And Christians and Jews. There is a sense in which people are saying that this racist mentality that makes you think you can judge, convict, and assassinate on the spot is not only un-American, it's ungodly. And so in this country, if we're going to deal with these two realities, we must deal with the love of weapons and the false sense of independence and freedom that weapons give us. And we have to realize we got a deep moral problem when there are folk more concerned about protecting assault weapons than fully funding public education. There's more concern about what kind of gun you can wear on your side than making sure that people have water without lead. There's more concern about how many guns you can buy than how much public education you can fund. That is a deep moral question. And the question is, how much more blood? That's the question for the legislators, that's the question for governors, the question, how much more do you need? How much more, America? You got over 20 first graders shot in Newtown, Sandy Hook, bodies mangled. How much more blood? You 9 souls in Emmanuel Church, how much more? This mother's child, how much more? 49 in Orlando, how much more? 11 times in his presidency, this president has had to act more like a pastor than, how much more? 5 officers in Dallas, how much more blood? How much more blood? How vampiric will America be? How much more blood will satisfy the thirst? 3 more killed in Baton Rouge. How much more blood? How much more blood will it take for our leaders and for us to say no? The blood, says Genesis, is crying from the ground. Have we had enough? Have we had enough? That's the question. Have we had enough? And as a Christian, my God, the blood does something to me, because I served this brown-skinned Palestinian Jew who was profiled by the state, targeted, crucified through a broken judicial system. He lived in the hood called Nazareth. He hung out with the gangbangers and made them his disciples. He never made a leper or a sick person pay for insurance or pay for health care. But his blood was shed. But there ought to come a time when there's been enough blood and there's time for a resurrection. I believe there's a time for the resurrection of the spirit of Emmett Till's mama. The spirit of Mamie Till that says, I ain't closing another casket. I'm going to make you look at it until we deal with the issue of violence. I want to suggest to the sisters of the Links and other sisters around this country, you have the power to be the Mamie Teals of this generation. You have the power to be the Rachels of this generation. You have the power to be the Esthers of this generation. There's a plot out to destroy our sons and daughters. And maybe it's time for the sisters to say, if I perish, I perish, but we're going to see the King until this is stopped.
So come on, you can do better than that for the Reverend and the panel. So specifically to my sisters, are you ready? I want to know, are you ready? Now, what you don't know about me, Reverend, and my sisters, is that I am a sister of the 60s. And I marched in Raleigh, North Carolina, and had water fountains on me. White folks spit on us. That's right. And so I am a victim of the 60s and a product. Right. So I'm ready to go to the Capitol. All right. And if my sisters are ready to go with me, are you ready, my sisters? Because I really do think the day has come that we've got to take off our St. John's and let's do something else about helping what's going on in this community. These are our sons. These are our godsons, and these are our nephews. And if it hasn't touched you yet, just hold on, because you may be next. So we as Links and other members of this community, we have got to do more. So my sisters of the DMV cluster, you're here. So I'm going to be calling on you. I'm going to be working with Madeline Lawson. We've been talking about this, and we've been given a challenge. And so I'm going to ask you if you're going to be ready to march with me on the Capitol. Are you ready? So we've had a distinguished group of panelists here today, and I hope you have enjoyed them. The hour is coming to a close, but we have a few moments for a few questions. And as you are approaching the microphones, I want to acknowledge the person that helped to actually chair this and put this together, Jacqueline Ellis. Where are you, Jacqueline? Chair of Legislative Issues. And her entire team. Would you please stand, all the members of the Legislative Issues team? Pam Means, Claudia, several. And I also have to stop and acknowledge all of my staff. You don't know who they are, but they're running around. They've been running around doing stuff all day long. Dion, Lakeisha, who else is here? Rhonda, Jackie. They are still working. All right. Your evaluations are in your seats. I'm trying to remember all of the notes I got. I feel a little bit like the ministers when they're at the thing and all the people are handing them notes. You are asked to complete your evaluation forms. We are asking you to leave by the center aisle. We have gift bags for you. You will get a gift bag when your evaluation form is filled out. For those who are Links, we need you to put your name on your evaluation form in order for you to get your 3 service hours. Am I right, Madam Kim? Please don't cursive it. Print it out so we can know exactly who you are. And I think I have about 6 minutes for questions. I recognize my sister here.
My name is Gayleen Kanoyton. I'm a member of the Hampton Links, and I'm also, we're thankful to have Congressman Bobby Scott in Virginia to champion for us for gun control. As first vice chair of the Democratic Party of Virginia, we fight for legislation. As president of my Hampton NAACP branch, we hold forums. I attend forums. We march. But there's 2 questions, or 1 question with 2 parts, that no one can answer. What happened to that person across the street that was peeking through the windows and told on you? What happened to that next door neighbor that corrected you when you were wrong? how do we get the community back to take responsibility of what's happening in their community? What do we do?
All right, so I'm going to ask which one of the panelists would like to address that. Reverend Barber?
Well, I think the issue is it's both and. It's not either or, because as you said, we have like Bobby Scott, but the people we're going to have to get to are not the Bobby Scotts, right? And so our communities many times are just overwhelmed. There are things, and it's, I don't juxtapose the two. It's not like you have to make a choice. There should be absolutely no excuse for us not having sensible gun legislation in this culture. It's absolute. And I heard the other day, I was in a forum, and one of these extremists who claims to be of a particular party, but they don't look like the party, they don't act like Abraham Lincoln, tried to say that to me. He said, well, you should stop worrying about that legislation. And you all, I said, no, don't you separate the two. Now, on the other side, you're right. So what did we do? We decided as clergy, when those deaths happened, to form something called the Drug Dealer Gangbanger Redemption Program. And we went to our scriptures and we found this story about Jephthah, who was put away as a criminal. But the community of ancient Israel came to understand that maybe you have your salvation locked up. What if you can get the people who've been in the hood, been in the gangs, to become redeemers? To begin to speak. And that's one of the programs we're working on as a way of holding responsibility of people who have been bangers, who have been in the drug gang, helping to bring people out and recognizing that many times we need people who know the hood to help save the hood. And that's one of the key things, I think, in terms of taking responsibility.
And from a business perspective, what we're doing is we're encouraging our companies to have their employees get involved in the local level. We have been seduced by global, by going overseas and being intrigued by other cultures. We are basically saying you have companies that have employee resource groups. We want you to focus on local. Be mentors to kids and programs, partner with Inroads and LEAD and ABC locally. Let the senior team deal with the international piece. We want you, boots on the ground, to focus on local issues. And be the head of the PTA. Run for the city council. Make sure that the PAC money is being actually and equally distributed across all communities, not just because it is the whim of the CEO as to where those monies go. So we're basically going global back to local.
Can I add one more?
Thank you so much.
May I just add?
Okay.
And just one final note from the prosecutor for your question. After you call the police, can I just say, please, please, please show up for jury duty. I can't tell you how often we hear people sit in the gallery and say, girl, when I get up there, I'm going to let them know I can't stay up here. I'm sick, got to go to work or do something else. It's our community. So after we call the police, come pick up the person, please remember also that we have not only a right, but an obligation to come for jury duty and to hold people accountable.
Thank you so much. That is going to be one of my calls to action to our Link sisters, serve jury duty. Because when you are there and our young men and women are in those situations where there's something called beyond a reasonable doubt, there needs to be somebody in that box that looks a little bit like that person. So I want to acknowledge this honor roll. You probably have been looking at this saying, what on earth is this honor roll? This honor roll is acknowledgement of the chapters of the Links Incorporated that have acknowledged that they have selected someone called a voting czar, the czar of voting. And the reason for that is because voting is important, and we want to make sure that you understand why you need to be voting, and we're going to ask Dr. Barber to make some comments about that.
Well, I just want to say two things. I was thinking about Julian Bond, who said you have to have two people working. He said one that takes each baby out of the water and one that goes back upstream and finds out who's throwing them in. In this election, it is very clear, especially on this issue of guns. I'm not going to be partisan because I know, nonprofit and all that, but listen at who is pandering to the NRA and who's not. So our children's lives and the kind of policies that are going to be shaped are on the ballot. This is an election far bigger than personality, for president all the way down. But whoever gets to be president is going to pick 4 members of the Supreme Court. And if we're going to overturn stand your ground laws and other kinds of laws and deal with how the Second Amendment, we're going to have to go through the Supreme Court at some point. So there is nothing right now more important over the next few days than for us to mobilize in the name of our children's lives and in the name of the martyrs, the votes in our community like never before. Like never before. And some people are suggesting, Madam President, that I'm just telling y'all, they're suggesting that black women really don't know who to vote for because they said stuff like, well, black people let certain people take us for granted. Well, then you really are talking about black women, because since black women are the highest voting ethnicity of any others, and so sisters, you know, you got to really kind of get upset when somebody suggests that you're gullible. Just saying.
You're just saying. We have time for one more question because we have closing remarks, and I'll call on my sister here.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. My name is Dr. Shirley Marks. I'm a psychiatrist and a 30-year alumna of the Links. I'm going to make comments because I'm a psychiatrist, and what I felt was missing today, although we reference it, was a representative from the mental health profession. I was at the National Convention, and and we have the resources. I'm a colleague of yours. I'm a psychiatrist, MD. We have psychologists. And so if somehow we can somehow infuse that, because most of you made references to a lot of things that are mental health, such as, and I'm just going to say them, suicide by cops by so many of our folks, PTSD, and on both sides, our young folks observing violence. I've treated veterans. Many of the cops have PTSD. Right. But they've told me they're not trained for anything but to use guns. So what do? They go to the state, the jails, and they get the jobs. Also, I've worked in prisons, and even though we think badly of murderers, I've treated murderers, and I've treated young men who are in their 40s who have been incarcerated more than half of their life. And one of the questions I like to ask them is, have you ever had a driver's license? And these are black and white prisoners, and so many of them will say, no ma'am. You know, and also we need to have some concern about mental health treatment being offered in our prisons rather than in our communities. And also what I know time is running short, but you know, in terms of what we can do as Links in terms of community education at all levels, whether this is national, our area, and local levels, because so many people hear involuntary commitment. Half the folk in this room don't know what that means, you know, or what it means, because I've received calls from Links members whose family members, you know, who are in need of mental health treatment. So I think there are some things that we can do in terms of the overall community education as it relates to prevention and other topics. It's probably going to be a seminar all in of itself, but I just want to highlight my profession just a little bit. That's oftentimes we're left out of the discussion. Thank you.
So my sister, we did our forum last year on mental health, and I would love to have meshed that panel with this panel. It would have been a dynamic panel, because she is absolutely correct. And mental health, as you know, is one of our initiatives, and so we recognize that mental health is integrated into everything that we do, and she is absolutely correct. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I am going to now call Reverend Barber back to provide us with a closing blessing, or whatever he may choose to do, because he has the microphone.
I was thinking as my sister was talking about mental health, the study that was done by a psychiatrist, I think his name was Horn, I may have the name, I know it started with an H, but they looked at, and it was interesting, it talks about with elephants and men, and how they removed all of the older elephants, the males, out of this community of elephants, and the juveniles went crazy and just started killing rhinoceros and that. And what stopped it was they put the older males back in. And I often wonder what the psychosis is when we have so many men locked up, and so many of them locked up for nonviolent crimes, and what that does in terms of the promotion of violence. So I guess I want to ask us to stand together and thank you for this privilege, and ask us to grab a hand of somebody. Gracious God, as we link up today in this room, give us the courage to mourn over the death and the violence, the hurt and the pain that impacts our community. But Lord, help that the mourning does not destabilize us or cause us to be depressed. But we pray for an anointing upon that mourning, that it might move us into action. Let us hear the blood crying from the ground, and let that blood speak to us and say to all of us while we are yet living that we have the power to stand in the face of death, to challenge death, and to always believe in the possibility of life. God, there is a special work for the Links because they have chosen to face this topic head on. Guide the leadership, empower the sisters, that they might even inspire the brothers, and that together we save the lives of our children and we stop the funerals. Amen. Amen.